I take advantage of this pause to briefly welcome everybody. I'm Dietrich Stout. I'm the director of the center, in case you don't know me or haven't been here before. And I just want to say a few words about the center. We are here to promote interdisciplinary research and dialogue at the intersection of mind, brain, and culture. We do this in various ways. One of the main things we do is host speakers, talks, discussion lunches like this one. We also have a graduate certificate in mind, brain, and culture. If you are a graduate student or know any graduate students, this can be a great way to join a cohort of like-minded individuals who are interested in this interdisciplinary dialogue. You take a core course with me. We help you select a few electives outside your home department, and you get a certificate. It's a formal qualification. It's kind of like a graduate minor. If you're interested in that, you can find out about it and lots of other things on our website. If you are or know any undergraduates, and particularly rising seniors, we host undergraduate fellows, undergraduate research fellows in the center every year, and we've got a call out. I think there's maybe a day or two left to apply for next year, but I wanted to flag that up, and our undergraduate fellows participate in the life of the center as well. And one of our mechanisms that I'm particularly fond of is that we sponsor courses like this one that Doctors Paulson and Azal de Silva are teaching this year. And one of the things you can use our funds for is to bring in outside speakers. And so we're very pleased to be able to host Richard Moore today. And I will turn it over to Brendan to do the proper introductions. So thank you very much and welcome to the center.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Dietz, and thank you all for being here. I just want to thank the sponsors of this event, of course, the Center for Mind, Brain, and Culture, whose space we're in right now, and who are sponsoring the course Theater, Empathy, and Social Change that I teach with Dr. Lisa Paulson. Richard will be visiting that class tomorrow, and the talk is part of that sponsored class. Also, the Woodward Academy. Jen Knox here is administrator and teacher from Woodward Academy. They're also sponsoring Richard's visit. Richard just spoke actually to all the middle school and high school students at Woodward yesterday and the day before. 1,500 students?
1,700.
1,700 students got to hear Richard talk about forgiveness as the culmination of a whole week of understanding with the theme experiencing the fullness of forgiveness. And also the Compassion Center, where I work, the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics. So these are the organizations hosting Richard's visit. At the Compassion Center, we engage in research on basic human values like compassion, empathy, and forgiveness through an interdisciplinary approach. My particular approach is through the cognitive sciences. But it's important, I think, in engaging in that research to hear from people who exemplify some of the traits that we're trying to study. And Richard certainly is the person who exemplifies forgiveness. When the Dalai Lama met Richard, when he was traveling to Ireland to meet and wanted to meet people who had suffered from the troubles and the conflict in Northern Ireland on both sides, he met Richard for the first time, and it was instantly taken by Richard's story of being blinded by a British soldier, yet forgiving that soldier. Richard later went on and befriended that soldier. And the Dalai Lama started calling Richard his personal hero. He's the only person in the world that the Dalai Lama calls his personal hero, apart from the time when he met Richard's mother and traveled to her home and met her and then said, your son is my hero. You are his mother. You are also my hero. You are mother hero. So it's an extremely special moment. Richard is going to talk about his personal life story and also the organization that he leads. He's the executive director and founder of Children in Crossfire, which is a charity in Ireland that works now primarily in Tanzania and Ethiopia, working in some of the poorest communities there, bringing access to clean water, early childhood education, and other much needed services, but also runs a program called Educating the Heart in Ireland, which brings the teaching of empathy and compassion to children in Ireland in order also to end the problem of global poverty. And with Richard is Ursula, who is the head of HR at Children in Crossfire and also personal assistant to the CEO, which is Richard. So we're so happy to have both of you here with us. Thank you so much for coming all the way over from Derry, Northern Ireland to be with us. And we look forward to learning from you today.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks to Brendan there for that very nice introduction. And also thanks to Jen Knox, who organised Woodward School and my visit here as well. So I really appreciate all the efforts that everybody put in. And I want to thank the centre here as well for hosting this event today and everybody else that's involved. And thank you for coming along as well. I'm sure it was the lunch that attracted you, really. But genuinely, thanks for coming along. I'm going to share my story with you. I'll keep it as brief as I can, but to allow time for as much time for questions as we can as well. And I would encourage you to ask questions. I learn a lot from questions myself, but there's also a lot that I brush over, and people maybe want to know a bit more. And as I was saying to the young people at Woodward yesterday, there's no question you can't ask. So don't think you'll embarrass me in any way. I come from a place called Derry in Northern Ireland, and from 1968 to 1998, Derry and Northern Ireland was gripped in a terrible conflict, what became known as the Troubles. And I lived in a place called the Craigan Estate, which was an area of social housing. There was a lot of unemployment in the area and all the various issues that would emerge from that. But the conflict really was very prevalent in where I grew up. In January 1972, there was a very famous but very sad incident in Derry where 13 innocent people were shot dead on the streets of Derry by the British Army. And that became known as Bloody Sunday. At least, 4 or 5 of those people who were shot dead that day came from the Craigan. So it's a very volatile place to live. And I went to the local primary school, or elementary school, you would call it. And beside the school was a police station. And because the police station was located where it was a target. It was a target for the IRA. It was a target for rioters. So you had bombing incidents down there, you had shooting incidents there, and you had riots there on a very regular occurrence. So eventually the British Army were brought in to protect the police station. So you had these, what I describe as semi-permanent military installations. They called them lookout posts. And these were surrounding the police station. So you couldn't get access to the police station. One of these lookout posts was positioned at the bottom of my school soccer pitch, or we would call it football pitch. So on the 4th of May, 1972, I was 10 years old at the time. I got out of school as normal, and me and my friends started to race along the bottom of the football pitch, making our way towards the gate to go home. And as we did so, I had to pass this British Army lookout post on my right-hand side. When I was 10 feet away from it, a British soldier fired a rubber bullet. It hit me here in the bridge of the nose. I lost his sight and was permanently blinded at my left eye. So I'm blind now, 52 years. What I remember that day was racing towards the lookout post, and then the next thing I remember, I woke up and I was lying on the school refectory table where my music teacher, Mr. Giles Doherty, he heard the bang, he ran over, he found me lying on the ground, and he lifted me and carried me and put me on the school refectory table. And I remember him saying to me, "What's your name, son?" And I told him my name was Richard Moore. And he got a terrible shock because he knew me very well. I was in his music class. but he wasn't able to identify me because of the extent of the injuries. My nose was completely flattened. My eyeballs were out of their sockets, and my face was just a bloody mess. So I went to hospital for 2 weeks. I spent 2 weeks in hospital. The first week I was in intensive care, so I don't really remember that much. Initially, they thought I was going to die from the injuries. Then they thought I might have brain damage. And then finally, they told my parents that I would be blind for the rest of my life. Sometimes I kind of reflect on that, what it must have been like for my mommy and my daddy to be told that. When I was 58 years of age, which was 4 years ago, I was the same age that my daddy was when I was blinded. And I just try to imagine what it must have been like for him. But anyway, after the first week, they moved me out into the general ward. And, you know, there was a young boy in the bed opposite me. And he was just in for natural causes or whatever. And I was a football or soccer fanatic. I would have kicked a Coke can around the street just to play football. And I remember, you know, joking with the wee boy in the bed opposite me, saying to him, I can't wait to get these bandages off my eyes. Do I teach you how to play football? Not realizing it wasn't the bandages that were preventing me from seeing. And for my family, it must have been very difficult. I come from a big family. There are 12 children in our house, 9 boys and 3 girls. And I was the second youngest. So for them to hear me talking the way I was talking, it must have been very difficult for them. And I'm sure they wondered, how are we going to tell Richard he'll never play football again? How are we going to tell Richard he'll never be able to see again? And it was about a month after I was shot. I was at home. And my brother Noel took me for a walk one day up and down our backyard. And this particular day, he said to me, Richard, do you know what has happened? And I said, yes, I knew I was shot. And he said, do you know what damage was done? And I said, no. And that's when he told me that I would be blind for the rest of my life. And to be honest with you, I literally took it in my stride that day. Didn't impinge on me at all until I went to bed that night. And when I was in bed on my own, I cried for the one and only time that I remember about blindness. And I cried because I realized for the first time that I was never going to actually see my parents' faces again. And I suppose to a 10-year-old boy, you don't think about the bigger things in life, about getting a job, your education, how you're going to cope. None of those things come into my mind. All I thought about was I'm never going to actually see my parents' faces again. And I cried myself to sleep that night. The next day, I woke up, got out of bed, began to put the pieces of my life back together. And I would always say that day was the first day of the rest of my life as a blind person. So I went back to the elementary school that I was shot in. Then I went on to high school, did all my exams there, went to university, got my degree in 1983, got married in 1984, got divorced in 1985. No, I'm only joking. It's amazing how many people don't even laugh at that anymore. How acceptable it is. So I have 2 children, Neve and Anya. Neve's, you know, Neve's a teacher now, and Anya works with children in Crossfire. But, you know, so I've done a lot of things after I was shot. You know, I learned how to play the guitar. And I played in like a sort of semi-professional blues band and traveled around Ireland with that. I set up a folk choir that sang at mass every Saturday night. I also I was compensated by the British, so they gave me money for being shot. And with half the money, I bought a house, and with the other half, I bought a pub. And 2 years later, I bought a second pub. So if you know anything about the Irish, then a pub is a good business to be in. So I ran my own business for about 14 years. I also kept my interest up in football. In the mid-90s, I became a director of Derry City Football Club. As you all know, Derry is the biggest club on the planet. And the last time we were champions of Ireland, I was a director, which was 1997. So it was a great experience for me. It was brilliant. One thing being a fan, another thing being a director. Being a fan, a director, and you won the league. It's just incredible. And it was just a great time. So anyway, why am I telling you all of that? I'm not sharing it to be boastful or try to impress anybody or anything. I tell it because I want to acknowledge the things in my life that made it possible for me not only to survive being shot and blinded, but to see blindness as a positive experience. I genuinely am a very happy and contented blind person. I don't miss my eyesight, really. Generally, I rarely think about my eyesight. So why is it? How is it that a 10-year-old boy can lose his eyesight the way that I did, dramatically overnight, and bounce back the way that I did? I boil it down to a number of things. First thing is I come from a good family. My parents and my brothers and sisters were the people that caught me when I fell and put me back on my feet. They were that secure base. All that love, compassion was what put me back on my feet. The second thing is I come from a good community. In Northern Ireland in the 70s, you had no such thing as trauma counsellors or therapists. I actually believe those words didn't exist in our vocabulary. So the people that supported me and supported my family were the local community, our neighbours, the local clergy, my teachers at school, and my general school community. And the other thing is, I was able to go back to school. Despite the fact we were living in poverty, despite the fact there was a conflict going on, I was still able to go back to school and get an education for myself. Even as a blind person, I had opportunities available to me. And it was during my sort of working life in my early 20s when I had the office and I was running the pubs and that I became very aware of who I was and why I was happy and all that. And I began to realize, there are children in other parts of the world that might have had their eyesight, but didn't have what I had. Children that wake up every day and suffer from the injustice of poverty. So I eventually sold out the pubs and I set up a charity called Children in Crossfire. And today, Children in Crossfire work in Tanzania and Ethiopia. And we work with some of the most vulnerable children in the world. As I say, children who wake up every day and suffer from the injustice of poverty. And I've had the humbling experience of going out there and visiting the projects that we support. So because of time, I'll not spend any more time on that. I would suggest to you, if you can, or I would invite you to go and look at the Children in Crossfire website, childrencrossfire.org. I'm not the only person that suffered as a result of my blindness. My parents suffered enormously. My parents were two very devout Catholics. My daddy was an unemployed shoemaker. My mommy was a homemaker. And their whole life was their children. They never supported violence at all in any way. But despite their best efforts to avoid the troubles found us. My mommy's brother, my Uncle Jared, was shot dead on Bloody Sunday. And then 3 months later, I was blinded at a school playground. The BBC made a documentary about my story. It's called Blind Vision. And as part of it, they interviewed my mommy. My mommy died in 2015. She was 95 years of age. But so they interviewed her, and it's the only interview ever of my mommy. And I'm just going to ask her so they play a wee clip of that now.
My name is Florence Moore. I'm Richard's mother. I'll never forget that day. It was just like the end of the world. The end of the world. My God. I'll never forget it. I thought just he was blind and that was the end of him. Like it was, I talked about him like as if it was a death. The world had just ended for me because I had seen no future. Richard, I thought, was useless. He was blind. What is he going to do? What trade would I put him to? What would I do with him? I just felt one day I was coming down Broadway and I met this woman going up and I said, "Do you know what I just want to do today?" She says, "I want to take Richard and Kevin because they're the only ones that depend on me, the rest of them married and away." And I says, "Just throw them in and jump on myself to the tide." That's what I felt like that day. And she says, "Oh dear, Mrs. Bear, don't do that." I cried night and day. Night and day. Every time I looked at him, I cried. If he had been, I think if he'd had his foot, I'd have been off his leg. It wouldn't have been so bad as long as he could see me. My husband was a quiet man, a very good man. But, I mean, he kept it all in, where I could cry, but he didn't. But he kept it all in, and I think that done him more harm than good. Richard was his whole world. What would become, and what would he do, and would ever be anything, would he be ever anything, come to anything? I just finished him. I think if the father had been living today, he'd been very happy. To see Richard, how he's got on, and his wife and family and all, like, I think he'd be very happy.
For me, I am a very happy and contented blind person, as I told you already. I am. But I wouldn't be telling you the truth about it. Admittedly, there are times in my life, there are moments in my life when I've missed my eyesight. For example, when my two daughters were born, Eve and Enya, I was there in the hospital ward when they come into the world, and I would have given anything to see them. When they open their eyes for the first time, when they smile for the first time, they're kind of moments I'll never get back. And in those moments, I do miss my eyesight. When they made their first communions and their confirmations, and they walked up the aisle of the Craig Chapel, and anybody that's here maybe isn't from the Catholic faith, confirmations and first communions are a big event. It's like a mini wedding. And they're going up the aisle in their beautiful dresses, and everybody. I remember sitting in the Craig Chapel thinking, I may as well be sitting somewhere else. In those moments, I thought about the soldier. I wonder, did he ever think about me, or did he ever think about the consequences of his action that day and what it meant for me for the rest of my life? Enya got married in 2018, my youngest daughter, and I was there and gave her away like any proud daddy would. But I found that day very difficult because I couldn't see her in her beautiful wedding dress. And like all of you are doing something now that I will never be able to do. You're looking at my children. You know what my children look like. I'll never be able to do that. That's a legacy of war. That's the legacy of violence. And we've all got to ask ourselves, is it worth it? Because it wasn't worth it for me. But despite all of that, I never had a moment's anger and a moment's hatred. And when you think about anger and hatred, it's a self-destruct emotion. It destroys you from the inside out. If I'd have been really angry with a soldier, or had I been really angry with the British Army, they wouldn't have been aware of it. It wouldn't have mattered to them. The only person affected by it would have been me. So somebody once described anger to me, it's like drinking a cup of poison and expecting the other person to die. Well, I'm glad I didn't have that to the point where I wanted to beat the soldier. I didn't know his name for 33 years. I knew absolutely nothing about the soldier for 33 years. And then in 2005, the same guys that made that documentary tracked the soldier down. And his name's Charles. And then in January 2006, I met Charles for the first time. And they sit at a hotel table opposite the man that pulled the trigger and blinded me for life. And caused all those hurts to me and my family all those years ago. And they like him was an incredible experience. And that day actually was one of the best days of my life, to be honest. It was a fantastic day. Because it's one thing forgiving somebody. It's another thing being able to tell them you forgive them. And I would describe that as the fullness of forgiveness. And me and him talked for 4 hours and 3/4 that day. And I learned 2 things about forgiveness. The first thing is forgiveness is first and foremost a gift that you give to yourself. So what I mean by that is, if Charles wants my forgiveness, he has it. But that's not what's important. What's important for me in here, in my heart, that I forgive him. For my happiness, for my peace of mind, for my ability to move on. The second thing about forgiveness is it doesn't change the past, but it does change the future. It's not a miracle worker. The fact that I forgive Charles isn't going to give me back my eyesight. It isn't going to take away all the hurts that were caused to me and my family all those years ago. But what it did do and has done is change my future. And I really believe that. I wouldn't be the person I am today, having done all the things I've done in my life so far, if I had been wrecked with anger, bitterness, and hatred. So I always say you can take away somebody's eyesight, but you can't take away their vision. And my vision is the work that I'm doing with children in Crossfire. My vision is the work that I'm doing here, coming and sharing my story with you, and the hope that it helps you now or in the future deal with whatever you might come across. So I'll stop there now, and I'm happy to take any questions. So thank you. Don't fall asleep or something.
Why do you think it was that you didn't feel very much or any anger?
I thought about that a lot. I think there's a couple of things. I think, first of all, I've told you I'm a very happy and contented blind person. I never really missed my eyesight that much. So I maybe don't feel the gravity of being blind. So in some ways, I'm not happy about it. So the other thing is, I was a 10-year-old boy. So I didn't have all the adult responses to being shot, blinded. So maybe by the time I thought about it as an adult, I'd already accepted all, what life had dished out, really. But I think the biggest factor of all would be parents. There were a lot of tears in our house. There was a lot of hurt in our house. But I never remember my mommy or my daddy speaking an angry word. So I think implicitly, like my mom and daddy weren't people of big sentences or, they were just 2 ordinary everyday people. But I just think they're just their whole demeanor, their whole message, their whole presence conveyed forgiveness. And I remember one time one of my brothers was shouting at my mommy in the kitchen, and I was in the living room. Not long after I was shot. And he was shouting at my mommy. He was 17 at the time. And he said to my mommy, they murdered my Uncle Jared. They blinded Richard. It's time to give our own back. And my mommy said to him, if you want to help Richard, go on there and help Richard. But you're not helping Richard by hurting somebody else. So that's where I think it came.
Wonder, we have like 6 or 7 people here from our social empathy lab, which is also sponsored by the CMBC. We meet right here. Greg, who just asked that question, is one of them, and Yulan's here too, actually, a graduate student in anthropology, who has done a lot of work related to grief. I just, watching the video interview of your mother, her grief really comes out. And I've never really thought about the relationship between grief and forgiveness. And I wonder, Yulan, is that something you've thought about? Or?
I was actually thinking about the stages of it. Sometimes for many people, it's not just sadness, but it starts with resentment. It starts with confusion and their processes of emotion. Almost like dropping. And I was wondering, there are these moments of almost like momentums where you experience a new phase of this too. And I was thank you, Richard, for sharing your incredible story. I listened to your story. I thought you also probably had those momentums where you were experiencing your own your path in different ways, and you meeting the soldier who shot, who did shoot you, could be one of those things. I was wondering more about the specifics of how that encounter went, and you also noticed that forgiving someone is different from telling them that you forgave them. I was wondering what exactly that meant for you and what it felt for you to go through that.
How I felt about the whole thing coming about with meeting Charles, it was very interesting, really, because up to I found out his name, I was a very together individual. I was loving life. I was doing everything I wanted to do. Couldn't think of anything better, really. I was happy, go lucky. And that genuinely was my disposition. And then I found out his name, and I felt myself beginning to change. I felt nervous. I felt weepy. And I felt guilty. And I felt guilty because I was going to meet the man that caused so much hurt to my family. And I also was going to meet a British soldier who a lot of families in Ireland and in my city have been hurt by the British Army. And here I was going to meet a soldier. It was almost like I felt I was like betraying my community in some way. But I still wanted to do it. And it was a very emotional journey for me going to meet Charles, which I never thought it would have been, to be honest. I'd never seen that coming. And the meeting itself was very nervy, really, at the start. I always describe it as like being on a first date, and we're all awkward, fingers and thumbs. But I had brought a photograph of my parents in my pocket. I brought a photograph of my children in my other pocket because I really wanted to see my parents' faces. And but as well as that, I wanted something to talk about, and have things to talk about. So I but you know, after the first 20 minutes, my inside I had settled down quite a bit. Um, for me, it was just seismic, the whole thing. The fullness of forgiveness. Again, I never saw this coming. I was very relaxed. I forgive Charles. I do forgive him. I've always forgiven him. I've realized that. And, you know, and I think that contributes in a large way towards my generally happy demeanor that I had throughout my life. And but I never thought I would feel the way that I thought after I told him. It was complete elation. I felt, you know, I just loved the fact that I was able to tell him. And I can remember thinking to myself, you know, if I hurt somebody, I would love them to come and tell me they forgive me. And I just thought it was a great gift for me to be able to tell the person I forgive them. So I sort of felt that that was the final link on the chain when I reflected on it. Didn't think about it that day, but afterwards I realized, you know, there was just something very special about being able to tell the person. You know, I felt compassion towards Charles. I felt like giving him a hug that day, and I can't explain why, but I did. So it's just an amazing journey to be on, and I can only say that to me, I was experiencing forgiveness in its full glory, you might say.
Um, when you were explaining to us the three things that helped you through when you were 10, community was second, and you just said something that stirred a thought I had when you were describing that, when you were saying that it felt a bit like a betrayal to go meet Charles initially. Do you think there's any possibility that the strength and unity of the community that lifted you up was born precisely out of its united opposition to the British?
The strength of the community was born out of, well, I mean, there is a kind of a unity and things like that. You know, the community in the Cregan did pull together generally around, you know, maybe resentment of the British could be very strong, but maybe a community that felt under conflict, a community that felt under attack, a community that felt that their rights weren't being acknowledged or recognized. And as a result of that, the community, yes, I think in many ways there was a unifying factor. We really felt like a community in every sense of the word. And you know, and things would happen that would re-energize that. Like for example, if the British Army raided the British Army used to come in the middle of the night and you know bust down people's doors and go in and arrest men from their homes and take them, you know, into prison or whatever. And like the whole community would be behind that. We used to have a thing called bin lids back in the day when now we have all fancy wheelie bins with the lid lifts up. But my day was 10 bins. Did you ever see Top Cat? The cartoon Top Cat? No? No, all right then. So so anyway, you had the bins with the lid on top, you know, and they were the alarm for the neighborhood. So if a house was being raided, then the rest of the neighborhood would come out and bang the bin lids. So you had this bang of the bin lids right across the whole neighborhood, and the communities come out. Now, that's an example to me of the community sort of. There was a community gel there. You know, when you hurt one of us, you hurt all of us. You know, so it's yeah. I do think that maybe this sense of cause, sense of been under attack, rights been denied, all those things, I think, united the community.
Related to that, Richard, I wonder if you could say something about reconciliation in Northern Ireland. So you know, the Good Friday Agreement was in 1998, so we've had 25 years now of relative peace in Northern Ireland. But you've talked about how you're still very concerned that the communities are still very divided. 90% of school children in Ireland go to segregated schools. Only 10% go to integrated schools, and there hasn't been a coming together of the communities, which means the conditions for conflict are still perhaps there.
I mean, what I would say we have in Ireland is peace, but we don't have harmony, you know, and you know, the communities live separately generally. You know, we are demographically divided, and we still have some interface areas where, you know, there's peace walls, for example, separating areas. There are fences, you know, separating, say, a Catholic area from a Protestant area, or a nationalist area from a unionist area, and that sort of thing. I think a lot of the issues that existed, and maybe impressions of each other or prejudice or whatever, they're all still there. So there's a lot of work to be done on that score, I think. You know, we have a political system that I suppose some people describe as institutionalized sectarianism. Because when we have a first minister and a deputy first minister in Northern Ireland, and the one minister is elected by the nationalist side, the other minister is elected by the unionist side, and that's the way it has to be. It can't be any other way. And no matter what goes through in Parliament in Northern Ireland, it has to be approved by a majority of each side. So it can't be an overall majority. It's got to be a majority of Catholics and a majority, or nationalists and a majority of unionists must vote for something before it can pass through Parliament. So it's what you would call, in many ways, institutionalized sectarianism. Now, there was a need for that maybe 25 years ago. I'm not entirely convinced there's a need for it now. But so a lot of the held views are still there, and that type of thing about how we feel about each other. So that prejudice still exists there, and I just think there's a lot of work to go on. Now, there is a lot of work going on in that field, but I still think it's a long way to go.
Oh, Chicago has a question.
Hey, Richard. Sorry, I'm virtually participating.
All right. Yeah, okay. You're looking well.
I just assumed I will have my spot, so I only learned it was fully booked. So anyway, thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
And I heard you talk many times, and yet today I also realized, how complex this concept forgiveness is, because your fullness of forgiveness is one thing. Many people usually assume forgiveness is something that people can experience after going through a number of emotions such as anger, resentment, this and that, right? And then also many people assume forgiveness means now you forgave, so I can move on, so there is no relationship afterwards. But what you're talking about is, if anything, starting a relationship to nurture after your initial step into this, meeting with Charles. But in some ways, sounds almost like you had nothing to forgive, right? Because you didn't have the resentment. So yeah, what it was like for you. I don't know if it makes sense. If you are not having any negative emotions toward somebody who blinded you from the beginning. So in some way, you could argue that there is nothing to forgive. So what you experienced was maybe not a usual form of forgiveness, but like something else. So I wonder, would they have something to say to this? Thanks.
It's a good point. I mean, and it's something worth unpacking a bit more. I mean, in many ways, I would say the same thing. I didn't have the resentment. I didn't have any hatred. So what do I have to forgive Charles for? You know, I trying to kind of think about that in a way. I suppose that's the ultimate aim of forgiveness, is to not have resentment or not have anger, I would imagine. So maybe I just, typical Richard, I took the shortcut and just went straight to forgiveness. Uh, and it was only really when I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama for the first time in 2000. And when I say I met him, I was just in the audience like everybody else. I didn't know him in any special way at all. And he didn't know me either. And it was only when he described what forgiveness was that I realized what I had been experiencing in my life as forgiveness. So I suppose the question emerging out of what you're saying is, do you need to be angry or do you need to have resentment in order to experience forgiveness? And I don't think so. I think you can experience forgiveness without having to make the hard journey to get there. But maybe it's better earned or something. So that's my initial thought on that, Chicago.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's really, really helpful. Even to say, yeah, you don't need to have a resentment in order to forgive. Again, really expands our understanding about what forgiveness is or could be. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty radical. I mean, I'm sure many people wonder why, maybe have asked you why the Dalai Lama calls you his hero. But to be able to reach that point of acceptance, that shortcut, kind of, to me, seems to make you like the Olympic athlete of stuff. It's hard to even imagine.
I'll take that.
But also your meeting with Charles, what you keep describing as the fullness of forgiveness. I mean, when I heard you talk for the first time, that's something that kind of blew me away and changed my understanding of forgiveness. Because I had always thought about forgiveness as going from anger and resentment back to some kind of normalcy. So going from negative 100 to 0, right? But not as anything so positive in that relative sense, right? That you've gotten over the hurt and anger, but not something that goes from 0 to plus 100 or plus 1,000, which is how you describe the fullness of forgiveness. The joy is like almost kind of ecstatic joy that you experience being with Charles, which in other conversations you've described as almost a spiritual kind of experience. Like, I mean, something transcendent. And I think that's just something I never imagined or encountered in forgiveness. And I've since, mentioned that to several other people, and almost everybody I speak to says, no, I've never heard about that before. I've never thought about that before.
I genuinely didn't think I was that unique, but I genuinely mean that. I can't imagine. It felt so natural to me. Forgiveness feels so natural to me, to be honest. I would love to say that I struggled to get there, but I didn't. It was there, and it felt so natural. And then to experience that joy. I mean, I was walking on the air when I met Charles, after I met Charles. And, if you had asked me to explain it on the day, I couldn't have explained it. It was just an elation that I didn't think I would have. Just to cross that bridge, to make that journey, to see the person as a human being. They actually have feelings of caring for him. I couldn't believe it myself. And you do think about it afterwards, and I thought about it afterwards, and I just thought, well, this is it, isn't it? This is it. This is the joy of it. This is what You know, I keep saying to people, look, if you could only begin to forgive, you would be a lot happier. I've seen a lot of angry people, justifiably angry people, who have been hurt in so many ways. And if they could just find that way to forgive, they would be so happy. And that's what meeting Charles is. Like, I was happy anyway, but meeting Charles was just the icing on the cake. And then you continue to have that friendship. You continue to have that. Me and him are good friends now. Like, and it's great. I wouldn't want it any other way. Like, all right, he done something bad. He did. The challenges that I've had in my life are because of what he did. The things that I miss are because of what Charles did. You know, you saw my mommy there, all the hurt that she had in her life. My daddy died 6 years after I was shot, and my mommy would say he died because of the stress of what happened to me. So there was a big price to pay for it all. And something just occurred to me in that video when I was telling you about the thing that I miss most of all. And it only occurred to me today, was not seeing my mommy's face.
Mm-hmm.
My mommy actually says that it was terrible that I couldn't see her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's only occurred to me today,
mm-hmm.
that she was having the exact same feelings. Mm-hmm. So all that was all the price to pay for what Charles did that day. But still, if anything, I'm a proof that you can move beyond that. The human ability to move beyond that is there. It is there. And, you know, genuinely, there's nothing special about me at all. There isn't. You know, I feel really privileged to be sitting here talking to all of you today and all of that, and amazing academics and brilliant people in your own field. I really do, like, and there is nothing special about me. There isn't. But I agree, my life's journey was very different from maybe yours, and so it's in there. It's in there, the human being, to do that. And I think people that can't get there, then we just haven't found the way to get them there. With it, you know. Anyway, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes. Well, it's just so interesting that even you yourself were surprised in that meeting with Charles. It's not like you went into it thinking all that was it.
Oh, I was. I was totally surprised. I was totally surprised how I feel. I still think about how I feel about him, and I really care about him. And I feel sorry for him. I would like to play the 10-year-old boy. And when I'm with him, I visualize it in my head. You know, how must he feel standing beside me, looking at a man that he blinded as a boy? So I try, you know, I've been, and I'd rather be in my shoes than his. You know, so, and some people don't like me saying that, but I feel sorry for them. You know, they sometimes make people a bit angry, but I can't help how I feel. And I share it because it just shows you the potential of the human being.
I think most of you don't know me. I'm an undergraduate. My name is Sean. I'm a chemistry and biology major. So I was just thinking about like potentially there's like a difference between like forgiveness as like a passive thing versus an active thing. Whereas like forgiveness as a passive thing might be like you said, like this like settling within yourself and like this like happiness that you can yeah, it's like freedom that you receive from like letting go of a certain grudge. But like meeting Charles for you was like the opportunity to have potentially like an active forgiveness, and that opportunity to meet Charles is almost like a gift, maybe to have like that like next like level where you could show that. I don't know. That's just some thoughts that I was thinking about.
Good Irish name anyway, Sean. That's the first thing. Yeah, well, it's a good way to put it. It's a good way to describe it. I suppose there's an inward and outward forgiveness, and like I've always said, if Charles wants my forgiveness, he has it. But I never really pushed the outward forgiveness thing because, you know, I just felt that it's very much a personal journey. But when you get the opportunity to tell the person you forgive them, then I suppose that's the outward working of it. And when you see that in action, it does give you that warm feeling, I suppose. And you're probably right that certainly some will think about it a bit more, but that could be that forgiveness has those two stages, the inward and the outward, or two elements to it. And they all have their part to play. I would always say like forgiveness is not about the other person, it's about you. But maybe it is about the other person too, but in the right circumstances.
Yeah.
In the right circumstances.
Because I think like an auntie in the church told me that like true forgiveness like comes with actions. And I've always just settled with like this like passive forgiveness, like, oh, like it's good enough if it's like settled. So we're just thinking about like whether it's like necessary or whether it's perhaps like better even if it's uncomfortable to go extra.
Yeah, as long as it's not an inhibiting factor, because some people feel like, that they can't tell the person, they won't forgive the person because they don't want the person to be forgiven. But that, in a way, stops you from finding that inner place where you can let go. So forgiveness very much depends on the other person. And that's where I think it can be, like an own goal, really. You're not allowing yourself to move on because you feel that you need to be able to forgive the person directly, and you can't bring yourself to do that.
Yeah.
Like I forgive Charles before he even knew his name.
Yeah.
And I think my mom may forgive Charles before she knew his name. My mommy, and my mommy was in her 50s when it happened to her. So it's not like it's a thing only gifted to a child. My mother had all the adult feelings. You know what I mean? And she met Charles as well. She was incredible with him as well.
Maybe our last question.
Okay. This is a big.
Introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, my name's Hunter. I'm a religion major. So I was just wondering, like, what do you see as the role of personal forgiveness and like reconciliation in tackling like larger societal problems like war, political, religious violence, poverty, like some like issues where you can't point to someone and say, okay, you pulled the trigger. And I asked this like, especially in reference to your work with children in Crossfire, where you're working with kids who are suffering from severe poverty, where there's not that, it's not some like you can't point to someone and say you're to blame. So,
I think that well, it depends. Going back to what Chikako was saying earlier, then does forgiveness have a place there? If there's no resentment towards anybody, then or anything like, well, where does forgiveness play its part in that situation? If like my situation, I was shot and blinded by a British soldier. If you're in circumstances where nobody's to blame, genuinely nobody to blame. Although I think in all those situations that you mentioned, there's somebody to blame. There's society to blame. There's world economics to blame. There's government decisions to blame. Where the suffering that you're experiencing is down to somebody somewhere, possibly making decisions. So you could feel anger and resentment towards that. But again, where I think it all begins is within yourself, and realizing that feeling angry about it or bitter about it is only affecting you. So there's nothing to be gained from that. I think and it's almost like, how do you get a society to approach the idea of forgiveness? I don't really have an answer to that other than to say it's like what the Africans say about how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite. And how you how you approach something like that is stage by stage. But ultimately, society is full of individuals, and I just think it's at that individual level. I can't think of any other way, really, to tackle it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think
No way.
I mean, it's interesting to think about how, yeah, like we're saying, like society is full of individuals. So I think the change starts at the individual level.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to think about how that individual change and kind of mentality is conducive or to like larger changes.
I know, like in Northern Ireland, we talk very much about space and larger groups and stuff, about allowing the space for people to talk. and that works at both individual level and group level, I think. Where you kind of respect the other side, even though you don't like them or you don't agree with them or you fundamentally disagree. If you really want to reconcile, if you're genuinely serious about reconciling, and I would say this quite often about Charles, you can't expect to meet the person that you would like to meet. You can't expect to meet the community that you would like to meet. You've got to meet them where they are. And they've got to meet you where you are. If you're really genuine about reconciliation. And I suppose it's a similar thing around forgiveness, maybe. If you're genuinely wanting to forgive somebody, then, well, first of all, I don't think the other person plays a big part, but where they do come into play is, I think you've got to respect them for who they are. Like Charles never apologized to me for the first 6 years that I met him. And everybody thought that well, not everybody, but a lot of people thought that I should never have met him unless he apologized first. But that's just me looking for the type of guy that I want to meet. He did apologize 6 years later, which is another sort of thing worth unpacking. But so to me, that's very important. That you've got these therapy basics, and the basics is, I think first of all you've got to start with yourself. Second of all, if you're doing community level, I think it's got to be, if you're serious about reconciliation or whatever, then it's got to be, you have to meet the people where they are, not where you'd like them to be. And I think that can be a big fundamental problem quite often.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.